Recently, due to COVID-19 pandemic, teachers have been giving assignments and projects to the students in their respective classes based on the alternative academic calendar provided by NCERT. And this AAA is being followed all across the country, cutting across different schools, different levels, and different places. So learning outcomes have been decided for the primary, upper primary as well as secondary science learning. However, when we assign projects and assignments based on the taught lessons, the students who are not assisted by their parents really find it difficult. They find it hard to comprehend the meaning of learning outcomes and why they should know about it and why they should do such kind of projects which they haven't done before, and what would be the benefits of doing such projects. They are not able to comprehend properly. For that purpose, I felt a need for coming up with a presentation on the learning outcomes and the curricular expectations from the children of upper primary science education. So here is a small presentation on learning outcomes and evaluation for upper primary science learning. Objectives of the presentation are to explain curricular expectations in science at upper primary stage to students who are struggling with projects and assignments given during COVID-19 under the following heading: what is science, what is curriculum, what are curricular expectations, and meaning of learning outcome. At the end of this presentation, the students who would go through it, they will apply the knowledge gained in doing their projects and assignments. That would be their learning outcome. So let us first start with the meaning of science, because very often the students feel that just by writing a test, they have fulfilled all the objectives of science. So what is science? Meaning of science, according to NCERT Pedagogy of Science, human beings have always been curious about the environment around them. One kind of response from the earliest times has been to observe the physical and biological environment carefully, look for any meaningful patterns and relations, and build conceptual models to understand the world on the basis of observations, and thus arriving at theories, laws, and principles. This human endeavor is science. So what are curricular expectations in science? Science curriculum at upper primary intends to develop scientific temper and scientific thinking, process skills of science which includes observation, posing questions, searching various resources of learning, planning investigations, hypothesis formulation and testing, collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data, supporting explanations with evidences and justifications, critically thinking to consider, weigh, and compare alternative explanations, reflections on their own thinking. Then appreciation for historical aspects of evolution of science, sensitivity towards environmental concerns, respect for human dignity and rights, and gender equity, values of honesty, integrity, cooperation, concern for life, and public property. So what is learning outcome? And this is the most important part that the children should understand. Learning outcomes in science refer to learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of a course or class. And learning outcomes in science for class 8 specifically include that the learner differentiates materials and organisms such as natural and human-made fibers, contact and non-contact forces, liquids as electrical conductors and insulators. Then classifies materials and organisms based on properties, characteristics, example, metals and nonmetals, kharif and rabi crops, useful and harmful microorganisms. Then the learner conducts simple investigations to seek answers to queries. Example, what are the conditions required for combustion? Why do we add salt and sugar in pickles and murabbas? Then the learner relates processes and phenomenon with causes. Example, deterioration of monuments with acid rain. The learner explains processes and phenomenon, example, production and propagation of sound, chemical effects of electric current. The learner writes word equations for chemical reactions, example, reactions of metals and nonmetals with air. The learner measures angles of incidence and reflection. The learner prepares slides of microorganisms as well as substances like onion peel. The learner draws labeled diagram, flow charts, example, structure of cell, eye, and experimental setups. The learner constructs models using materials from surroundings and explains their working, example, Iktara, electroscope, and fire extinguisher. The learner applies learning of scientific concepts in day-to-day life, example, purifying water, segregating biodegradable and non-biodegradable wastes, increasing crop production. The learner discusses and appreciates stories of scientific discoveries. The learner makes efforts to protect environment using resources judiciously, suggesting ways to cope with environmental hazards, exhibits creativity in designing, planning, making use of available resources, then exhibits values of honesty, objectivity, cooperation, freedom from fear and prejudices. Then, what is to be done for learning outcome, for achieving learning outcomes? The learner is to be provided with opportunities by the teacher or parents in pairs, groups, individually in an inclusive setup and encouraged to explore surroundings, natural processes, phenomena using senses, vis-a-vis seeing, touching, tasting, smelling, hearing, then pose questions and find answers through reflection, discussion, designing and performing appropriate activities, role plays, debates and use of ICT, record the observations during the activity, experiments, surveys, field trips. The learner is to be provided with opportunities to analyze recorded data, interpret results and draw inference, make generalizations and share findings with peers and adults, exhibit creativity, presenting novel ideas, new designs, patterns, improvisation, internalize, acquire and appreciate values such as cooperation, collaboration, honest reporting and judicious use of resources. Let us have an example of how a learner can show his or her learning outcomes. Let us take the example of Chapter 1, Crop Production and Management. The learning outcomes of learners should be to conduct simple investigation on use of tractors to plow smaller and larger fields, classify smaller and bigger land holdings, explain process of plowing and its effect on soil, draw label diagrams of parts of crop field, plowing machines, modern and traditional, apply idea of ideal plowing conditions and use of different tools and interprets the ideal tools to be used for land holdings in his or her area, exhibit honesty, cooperation and creativity in carrying out the activity, assignment and project, make efforts to clean the nearby surroundings and keep record of the entire assignment or project in an assignment or project file, either in pages or in printed form, and can also prepare a PowerPoint presentation of his or her project using ICT. So let us learn about this example a little more. For example, you have been given an assignment, and now how you can maintain the record of this assignment in a record file. What steps you should follow, and what sort of headings you should write. The first one should be the aim of your project or assignment. Second, duration of completion of the project, materials that you have used. Then what are your observations in an observation table. Then if you had carried out any group discussions with your friends or elders or teacher, then the discussion and its outcome should be written. Learning from the use of traditional ways of plowing should also be mentioned, and learning from modern methods of plowing should also be written here. That will show a clear picture about your understanding of the traditional and modern ways of plowing. If you have recorded any videos of traditional and modern methods of plowing, then the videos should also be a part of the project. So also the photographs taken, and then you have to write your conclusions. What according to you feel that whether traditional plowing or modern plowing is good for your land holdings, smaller, big. And finally, you have to write what you think about your work, how better you could have done, or whether you have done your best. Is there any room for improvement? And in Hindi, call that as Chintan. So this is how you should maintain and you should do. And by looking at how you do the project, a teacher understands what kind of learning has taken place within you, and that is called as learning outcome. Therefore, all children should show interest along with the parents in the completion of assignments and projects based on the guidelines provided by NCERT and followed by their respective schools.